Warning, the Savage Nation contains adult language, adult content, psychological nudity. Listener discretion is advised. Now, here he is, author of Liberalism is a Mental Disorder, Trump's War, and God, Faith, and Reason, Michael Savage.
Hatred is in the air. Hatred is in the air, spreading like a virus. The left does not even understand that they have become the very enemies of themselves. Here's a story that's a little obscure. Dentists accused in Las Vegas resort case of rape have charges against them dropped. Say it's an ordinary case, but it isn't. Charges against 4 California dentists, including 3 brothers, accused of kidnapping by an unnamed woman who told security at the Wynn Las Vegas she was sexually assaulted in a suite while drunk. Well, 3 of them were brothers. They was said that they kidnapped and assaulted the woman, and they said, wait a minute, no, we never did that. So cell phone video showing that the allegations were completely made up were shown in court, and the charges against these innocent men were dropped. But what happens to the liar? What happens to the rapist, the woman who raped their reputations? Well, the men themselves are acting real good. They're saying, well, at this sensitive moment in our history, we believe that women should be respected and heard and believed. But as this case shows, it is also important to keep a critical eye on those willing to use the Me Too movement for their own selfish motives, and remember that innocent until proven guilty is one of our country's bedrock principles. Now, Kamala Harris never learned that as a prosecutor in the East Bay. Dianne Feinstein never learned that because she, of course, is above the law. Dick Durbin, who called our U.S. Marines fascists and Nazis, never learned it. Charles Schumer never learned it in Brooklyn. The entire Democrat Party has become one of, well, you can use any adjective you would like. But let's not forget how many men's lives have been and are being ruined by women who are making stuff up. If you think this is new, you're crazy. They're now attacking Lindsey Graham with homophobic slurs. The very same left that lectured us for 50 years that being gay is okay is now using homophobia to attack Lindsey Graham, calling him a closeted idiot. I'm not making this up. It just shows you what a vermin, what kind of people these are. Rosie O'Donnell, Jimmy Schlimmel, that schmuck Bill Maher joked about Graham being gay and even joked at John McCain as well. The loser, Maher, joked that Graham needed the stabilizing influence of his dead boyfriend. On CNN, the 2 losers, Chris Cuomo and Don Lemon, mocked Lindsey Graham for having the vapors. Don Lemon said in a mock Southern accent, first he's got the vapors, referring to a joke where women who were said to have the vapors if they were acting hysterical or irrational. You think that's funny? Rosie O'Donnell started the hate train Wednesday, calling Lindsey Graham a closeted idiot. Wait, it gets even worse. Rosie O'Donnell said, F you closeted idiot. This is the patriarchy exposed. This is reality. Deal with it. Comedian and far-left activist vermin Kathy Griffin joined in on the gay bashing, tweeting on Thursday referring to Graham as a she and calling him Miss Lindsey Graham. Griffin said, look at Miss Lindsey Graham trying to be all tough. What? Does Putin have a picture of Lindsey doing a donkey? I'll stop right there. It's an article on Breitbart by Justin Castro, who I commend for putting this together. But it goes to the argument I've been making for many, many decades, that the left only uses gays and minorities if they are on the plantation and can be counted upon to push the communist agenda. But once a gay person or a minority goes off the plantation, they become open game to be hunted like animals. Look what they did to Clarence Thomas. Now, I want to go to the issue of women and beauty. It's a little obscure point, but I was looking at the guidelines for beauty back in ancient Rome, and look how things have changed. Now, remember, before I read this to you, it's not directly related to anything. It's just a little potpourri of an opening here, because my new book, Stop Mass Hysteria, is somewhat of a mixture of politics and history. Listen to the guidelines for beauty. Now, remember, before you listen to this and say, wait a minute, I agree with that, I don't agree with that, beauty is a cultural thing. Different cultures look at beauty in a different way. So I'm going to read you the standards for beauty in Roman women as depicted in the time. First of all, they all ought to have had the angelic look. They had to look angelic. And so having tanned or dark skin was not regarded as attractive. And pure white skin was seen as the sign of the upper class in ancient Rome. As native Roman women would not naturally have white skin, they used white chalk, lead, or arsenic to whiten their faces. Large eyes with long eyelashes were also prized. Why? Did you know why large eyes with long eyelashes were prized in ancient Rome? It was believed that women's eyelashes fell out from excessive intercourse, so long eyelashes became a sign of chastity. Now, you understand where some of these beauty secrets are still operational in our society with fake eyelashes, right? Wait, a little more. Guidelines for beauty in ancient Rome. Hair was a function of beauty for men and women in ancient Rome, so thick, curly locks were admired most. Women would dye their hair black, red, or blonde to emulate the luscious, thick styles of the goddesses. They would also wear wigs. Any hair not on the head was seen as unattractive and removed by plucking, stripping, or shaving. Now, here's something odd for those of you in America. A modest bosom. Very different today, isn't it? But small, round breasts were actually admired far more than larger ones. Large breasts were seen as being humorous or a sign of old age. In fact, young Roman girls were so determined to have small breasts that they wore a kind of early brassiere in the form of a band, excessively tight to inhibit the growth of their breasts. What was the perfect childbearing figure? It wasn't the little skinny girl of today with no hips at all, because being thin was not regarded as an attractive trait in Rome. With so much of a woman's life focused on rearing children, wide hips were regarded as very attractive. And although men didn't like their women excessively large, a plump, firm body was seen as the ideal type. One more point about guidelines for beauty in this age of women. Less is more. Extravagance was frowned upon. Although wealthy women did sometimes wear jewels and necklaces, anything more was viewed as showing off or being overly boastful, a very negative trait. Attention, rapsters out there. And this is likely why almost all contemporary depictions of Roman goddesses are quite simple, minimal, and modest. That's Roman women in mythology, not from mass hysteria, but from a book I read all about history, Book of the Roman Empire. It's fascinating to read about ancient civilization. But now, have you heard the phrase Vestal Virgin? Since at the Kavanaugh hearings, Dr. Fraud was held up and made into a sacredly pure Vestal Virgin, as you well know. No one asked her about her background, what she was like in high school or college, because the vermin on the left would scream that that was somehow sexist to do so. But I think that is an important point. I mean, what was her background? Now, what is a Vestal Virgin? Well, it was very important in ancient Rome. I'm not going to read it to you because you can find it on your own in Roman mythology. I'll just give you one hint. You have to go back to the story of Romulus and Remus. Who was Romulus and who was Remus? Well, it was a Vestal Virgin by the name of Rhea Silver, not an accuser of Kavanaugh. There was a Vestal Virgin named Rhea Silver. Apparently, Avenatti hasn't been able to find her yet, who, after being raped by the god Mars, gave birth to the founders of Rome named Romulus and Remus. Did you know that? Well, the rest is history. And I give this to you to show you that what we're going through right now, while not related to ancient Rome, is related to history in many ways. What Kamala Harris, Dianne Feinstein, Cory Booker, shall I name all of them, and the others on the committee are doing today, is actually nothing new under the sun. It went on in the Soviet Union, where all you had to do was denounce someone, and their life was ruined. It went on in Hitler's Germany, where all you had to do was renounce someone, and their life was ruined, and they were imprisoned, if not executed. So the new left are actually the new right. The new left are the new fascists, as many have said. But what we are witnessing, and the average person certainly sees through it, is unfounded accusations are not American at all. In fact, they're very un-American, which leads me to the House of Un-American Activities Committee of the 1950s. How many years were you leftists lectured to about Senator McCarthy being a very bad man because he accused, in some cases, falsely, people in America, mainly in the government, in media, and in academia, of being communists or communist sympathizers, right? And we were told that was a false thing because it ruined lives. And McCarthy was said to be a bad man. Now, let's put aside the fact that most of the people that McCarthy outed as communists turned out to be communists, as we learned in the 1980s when the Venona Papers were released. You'll have to research that, Venona Papers. It confirmed that almost all of the people accused by Senator McCarthy were, in fact, fellow travelers and communists. But putting that aside, how many times have you been lectured by leftist professors that McCarthy was a bad man, that McCarthyism, which became synonymous with false accusations, was an evil thing? We wake up and we see that Feinstein is now McCarthy, only there's no truth to her allegations. We see that every one of them on the committee are the new Soviets, and I am only hoping that the fairness of the American people will shine through all of this murk and that Kavanaugh will be voted upon and approved. However, I am not optimistic that will happen because I did some research on who Senator Flake is. And you'll be shocked to find out that Senator Flake, while appearing to be somewhat middle of the road, is anything but. I think that Flake will vote against him no matter what the FBI says. Now, remember this before we go on. Kavanaugh had at least 3 FBI investigations along the way to becoming a federal judge. Barack Obama had none. In fact, I said it when Obama became president. He could not have passed an FBI background check and been an even ordinary FBI agent. Obama could not have become an ordinary FBI agent because of his associations with very dangerous leftists, including Bill Ayers and others. But he never was subjected to a background check. Do you think Feinstein could pass a background check? You think Cory Booker could pass a background check? Do you think Kamala Harris would welcome a background check? Do you think that Turban Durbin, who called our U.S. Marines Nazis and fascists, could pass a background check? I really wonder why we don't have an FBI background check of all of the new Soviets. This is Michael Savage, author of Stop Mass Hysteria.
Savage.
It is the Savage Nation. We're saluting women today on the Savage Nation. Yeah, right. They're all so pure. Every woman is pure. Every woman is good. Now, I believe in equality, and I believe that women, just like men, are capable of great things and evil things, and that should be an obvious thing to anyone. But apparently, the way the narrative is being played out by the Democrats is all women are to be believed and they're innocent and pure, and all men are evil. So you have to destroy the patriarchy. Well, again, let's go back in history. In ancient Rome, did you know that there were women gladiators who were just as bloodthirsty as male gladiators? Did you know that? You didn't know that. You didn't know any of that. There were female gladiators who were just as bloodthirsty as male gladiators. They loved blood. They loved the blood sport. And so now we see the gladiators in modern times sitting on a committee, like in ancient Rome, destroying a man, cutting him to ribbons in front of the public, and the public sits like dummies and doesn't see the bloodthirstiness of these women. Are they more like Venus, the goddess of love and beauty, or like Vulcan, the god of fire? Now, who was Venus? We hear Venus. You know that the first 5 planets in our solar system are named after Roman gods because Romans could see them without a telescope. Did you know that? First 5 planets named after Roman gods to show you the influence of ancient Rome. So Venus was the goddess of love and beauty. She was the daughter of Jupiter and Dione, an oceanside nymph. And Venus was desired as a wife by many of the gods. And she was promised by Jupiter to her brother Vulcan. And guess what happened? Unsatisfied with her marriage to the ugly god, Venus took many lovers, including her own half-brother, Mars, the god of war, with whom she had several children. Well, okay, it has nothing to do with what we're going through today. But sometimes I have to look at history or science or poetry or art or music to get away from the insanity of our times. And that's why I'm bringing you a little history today to lighten the load of carrying the horror that is being inflicted upon the American people by the Feinstein gladiators who are out to destroy who I think is an ordinarily decent man. Now remember, Kavanaugh has gone through 3 background checks. He was a virtual unknown federal judge. Nobody ever said anything about him in all these years. How come all of these poor innocent women came forth all of a sudden? Because they're setups, every last one of them. And all you have to do is look at the last one, who was, unfortunately, shows you how low the peacock has fallen, that NBC would take this scummy lawyer who brings forth a liar of the highest order, and she comes up there, and then they say, well, we can't verify anything she's saying about Kavanaugh, the latest one, but we're going to give her airtime anyway. So they turn to homophobia to attack Lindsey Graham. They turn to a scum lawyer who represents a stripper, and they bring up this Julie Sweetneck or Sweatneck. And yet her ex-boyfriend of Julie Sweatneck says that Julie Sweatneck threatened to kill his unborn child, and she exaggerated everything. Julie Sweatneck's boyfriend, who has a name, Richard Vanecci, said that this accuser of Kavanaugh is fundamentally crazy, that she threatened to kill his unborn child and exaggerated everything. So she goes on NBC, a once distinguished network, and she backtracks on some of her claims during the interview, and NBC doesn't apologize. So this is what's going on in America today. You have a choice, the Democrats, or in this case, hold your nose, the Republicans.
Savage.
I want to talk for a minute on the Savage Nation about libel and slander, better known in the broad category of defamation. I'm a broadcaster who's been in the business 25 years, and I have been defamed, I've been lied about, slandered over the years, and I've defended myself every time, and I've won every case. But we're witnessing right now a form of defamation never before seen in American history, perhaps since the Salem witch trials. And in my book, Mass Hysteria, I have a chapter entitled From Salem to CNN, How Hysteria Taught Us to Anesthetize Ourselves. And I say we are at risk of returning to this medieval state as we allow the corrupted mainstream press and agenda-driven agitators to gain control of sections of the population. Then I ask, how is the nation's best interest served when the self-serving New York race baiter Al Sharpton calls for federal defunding of the Jefferson Memorial? Well, that was one example. Now, here is a man whose background included vocal, visible support for 15-year-old Tawana Brawley from Wappingers Falls, New York, who in 1987 lied and claimed she was raped by several white men, police officers among them. Al Sharpton was joined by those other pillars of the black community, the racist Nation of Islam head Louis Farrakhan, and that famed booster of women's rights, Bill Cosby. Well, together with the complicit media, they whipped up blind frenzy and mass hysteria, all of it based on a lie. Tawana Brawley later converted to Islam, changed her name, became a nurse, and moved to Virginia. Though Sharpton lost all credibility for his rush to judgment, he continues to do now what he did then, spread mass hysteria that elevates him in the eyes of his community. Like the inhabitants of 17th century villages, people hear him speak with authority about subjects in which he has absolutely no objectivity, yet they cheer and follow and call for blood. Today, it's mass hysteria raised against one of the towering figures of American history, Thomas Jefferson. Today's youth, you see, are the targets and cause of campus progressives. Children have always been victims of manipulation. The testimony of children was used against the supposed witches in Salem, Massachusetts. Children are the ones whose minds are being anesthetized and destroyed by drugs, including marijuana. Throughout history, those who perpetrated hysteria are immune from the consequences. The essential question our nation has been forced to ask over and over and again today, who is pulling the strings and why? Well, we finally have the faces of those in injecting America with these lies and this hysteria. The names are to be seen in plain English. The defamation is to be seen by all Americans. Dianne Feinstein, Cory Booker, Kamala Harris. Shall I name all of them, or you don't know who their names are? So let's look at libel and slander. If someone accuses you falsely and it causes you harm, you have a civil remedy if those words end up causing harm to your reputation or your livelihood. Libel is a written or published defamatory statement, while slander is defamation that is spoken by the defendant. So you have to look at proving libel and slander. I would like to propose that anyone who slanders anyone in public, even a public figure, has to pay the price in paying the same penalty that the individual who was slandered or libeled would have paid. In other words, if someone slanders, let us say, a public figure, and that public figure, by being defamed, loses a position and loses their money or something like that, a certain amount of money, and then it turns out that it was false, based upon falsehoods through the witch hunt, the individuals who slandered or libeled that figure should have to pay the exact penalty that that individual would have paid had they been found guilty of such slander or lies. What is wrong with that? Nothing. So here's the problem. The law itself is the ass. The law is an ass, said the great, great British essayist Samuel Johnson in the 1800s. He said the law is an ass. Shakespeare had some wonderful things to say about lawyers, which I cannot repeat on this program. But the fact of the matter is, most lawyers, as you well know, are not at all in it for the truth. They're in it to crucify people. Just take a look at the one who's representing all of these fake accusers. One of the lowest scum to have ever received a law degree. And there he is on every television channel over and over and over again, while distinguished scholars and broadcasters, myself included, are completely blocked from the Soviet networks. Why is this happening? Why? Because, as I just said to you, there is a plan. This is not happening by accident. As I concluded in the beginning of Chapter 5, the essential question a nation has been forced to ask over and over is, who is pulling the strings and why? Why is this happening? Well, let's look at a real war against women. And you have to look at the real war against women that is being conducted by those who claim to be protecting women. So we go back to the Salem witch trials. And the hysteria against witches in the Salem region was fomented in an environment of economic and socio-political turmoil. Does it sound familiar? Well, it'll be familiar to you after you investigate this a little bit more. So what were the Salem witch trials? What happened? Well, the minister of Salem Village was the strict pious Reverend Samuel Parris, and he had a son Thomas and two daughters, ages 11 and 9. In January of 1692, the girls began having tantrums, or fits as they were called at the time. The girls threw objects, screamed, made strange noises, and twisted themselves into bizarre positions. As with John Goodwin's children in Connecticut, a doctor was called, and once again, unable to cure the girls, the physician pronounced the ailment to be demonic in nature. Well, then another local girl, 11-year-old Ann Putnam, began having, in a similar fashion, a pair of magistrates demanded that the young ladies name the source of their bewitchment. On February 29th, under pressure, the girls identified 3 women: Sarah Osborne, an elderly woman living in poverty; Sarah Good, a pregnant beggar woman; and the Paris' Caribbean slave, Tituba. Conveniently and predictably, 2 of them were among the rabble and that authorities did not want in their town. Good and Osborne professed their innocence to no avail, and so did Tituba at first. Though slaves were rare in the region, she had been with Reverend Parris for 14 years, and she loved the Parris children, for whom she was largely responsible. But Parris whipped her into confessing, promising to secure her release if she did. So the poor woman admitted to the magistrates that, quote, "the devil came to me and bid me serve him," and added that she was not the only local witch wanting to harm the Puritans. She also informed them that she had in fact baked a witch cake from rye and urine with which she gave the family dog, just in case the pet was a familiar or helper of a local witch. What happened next? The 3 women were imprisoned the next day. Despite his promise, Paris bowed to political expediency and allowed the slave to remain behind bars. It would be late spring before the governor finally convened the Special Court of Order and Terminer. As soon as the women were imprisoned, the Salem authorities undertook a program we know all too well, the art of distraction. Pay attention, Diane. If there were problems between the merchants and farmers, if there were challenges to the local theocracy, then leaders must create a diversion, Diane, an event that would dominate what passed for a news cycle in 1692. And that was witches, right in their midst. Tituba had said there were others. The word was spread that they had to be found. Using the tactics of Dianne Feinstein and the committee, the tactics of mass hysteria and paranoia, Europe had purged itself of tens of thousands of undesirables that way. Salem and its environs had to do the same. As with so many things, one can hold the media partly responsible for this hysteria. And I give you some examples of how the media was used in that time through books and publications. And so the hysteria gathered force throughout the early spring, and the numbers of those accused continued to grow. By the end of May, more than 60 people were jailed and awaiting trial for witchcraft. That was when the governor was finally forced to establish a special court of Oyer and Terminer. And what happened then? On June 10th, that institution, Dianne Feinstein, hanged its first victim, Bridget Bishop, a brassy widow whose late husband had run an inn. She was apparently accused of no crime in particular. Other than that, she was a soft target. The woman was known for playing shuffleboard and wearing red clothing, which was considered to signify sexual yearning and prowess. Well, it went on and on and on. And what happened? Well, Cotton Mather put his agenda ahead of justice. He crafted the equivalent of fake news and contributed his own call to arms at the court, writing the following: "We cannot but humbly recommend unto the government the speedy and vigorous prosecution of such as we have rendered themselves obnoxious, according to the direction given in the laws of God and the wholesome statutes of the English nation for the detection of witchcrafts." And so what happened was, at the peak of the hysteria, few citizens, regardless of their standing, were immune from accusation. And they went on. They got one person after another under the Salem witch trials. And so now we speed forward to today. And I'm reading from a book that I'm sure will become a very popular book in America for many years to come, Stop Mass Hysteria. I want to make one important point, and that's one that you're going to face today and for the next months and years ahead. And that's the difference between mass hysteria and justified concern. If, for example, the public had risen up against Cotton Mather and his cohorts, that would not have been hysteria. In 2018, this is something the mainstream media did not understand. If you look back through history, not agenda masquerading as history, which is all you get from the media today, you would learn that the following: that for the last 1,400 years, radical Islam has been at war with the world. That is not Islamophobia, as the mainstream media would have you believe. It is fact. It is history. And I urge you to read this without the bias I mentioned earlier in this book, Indoctrination versus Truth. And I give you a list going back only 40 years for a partial listing of the atrocities going back to 1979, and the U.S. Embassy in Iran was taken over by radical Muslim males. And I bring this up because the mass hysteria in our society is running in the opposite direction as well. And what do I mean by that? None in the media will dare call it by its proper name. None in the media will reference 9/11 in its proper context. None in the media will recognize that we are still at war and have been at war because they have been at war with the West for 1,400 years. And that is why I tell you, history is a great, great teacher. We're going through a form of mass amnesia, which is not a myth. Mass amnesia is not a myth. It is a conspiracy of sorts, a vaguely defined plan to undermine the nation. Mass amnesia. Its perpetrators know that a malleable populace is a necessary tool to achieve an agenda. And as Bernie Sanders discovered with his pie-in-the-sky promises during the 2016 presidential campaign, if you cannot seduce them with promises of free things and mass hysteria about the other guys, you have to take another tack. You have to dull their wits but tell them that the means is okay. It's harmless. It's fine. And what I'm talking about today is marijuana. Remember, for many, many years, marijuana was seen as the evil drug, the most evil drug of all. And we were subjected to a form of mass brainwashing about the dangers of marijuana. But today, the exact opposite is being promulgated, which is that marijuana is the miracle cure for everything, from baldness, halitosis, cancer, fallen arches, arthritis, rheumatism, runny noses, runny ears, runny eyes, depression. It's insanity, a form of mass hysteria that is used to drug the youth in order to manipulate them into following the orders of the left.
Savage.
I've told you this before, but, if you have a car that has 5,000 to 150,000 miles, you don't really have to pay high repair bills, even though you might do so if you don't get what I'm about to tell you. CarShield, they have paid out close to $2 billion in claims, and they're ready to help you. And so if you take your car in and all of a sudden they say, oh, it's got metal filings or the carburetor's shot, or worse yet, you're going to pay thousands of dollars. That's why you got to get extended vehicle protection from CarShield, right? We know what these things can cost today. A sensor alone could be $1,000 or more. But you also get 24/7 roadside assistance, a rental car while yours is being fixed for free. So you can save yourself thousands in future car repairs, get covered by the ultimate and extended vehicle protection. All you have to do is call 800-CAR-6100, 800-CAR-6100, and please mention code SAVAGE or go to carshield.com, again, code SAVAGE, and you'll save 10% on their policy. You can't do without it. That's carshield.com, code SAVAGE, or call 800-CAR-6100 and mention code SAVAGE. A deductible may apply. Now, in the next hour, I'm going to give you a background on who is Senator Flake. You may not know who he is or why he's acting the way he is acting, and you'll be surprised to learn what I'm going to tell you about in the next hour and why he's acting this way. I personally think that although he said that if the Republicans bring in an FBI investigation and it's proven to be that Kavanaugh is clean, he'll vote for him. I believe he's not going to vote for him. I believe he's set up to make sure that Kavanaugh fails. And I believe he has feathered his nest with the Democrats for a very long time, and I will tell you why I say that. We'll also talk about the stolen valor allegations against Senator Blumenthal. I'm glad to see the president picked up on it after I brought it up last week. Over and over and over again, it was nobody on Fox News, it was me, who brought up the fake claims of Blumenthal when I said, remember what he did. So the president picked up on it, which is very good. But this is only baby steps against them. We need a real assault. We're at war. Never forget that we're at war. The left knows it. They fight viciously. They go for the throat. They will destroy everything in their sight. They don't care what manner they do it in. And all we have back are some tepid accusations about the stolen valor allegations against Senator Blumenthal. That is a baby step, but a good one. And I think I'm going to ask you in the next hour to call the show. And if you know anything about any of these senators that can be validated that is not generally known, that you think might bring them down, I'm going to open it up to you at 855-400-7282, 855-400-SAVAGE, because I think that turnabout is fair play. If you're in Connecticut and you know things about Blumenthal, or New Jersey and you know things about Cory Booker, or in Michigan and you know things about a senator there, or in San Francisco and you know where the skeletons are buried for certain senators and such, why not air them in public? And you say, well, wait a minute, they're not validated. What goes around comes around. You know what I'm
saying? Savage. Warning, the Savage Nation contains adult language, adult content, psychological nudity. Listener discretion is advised. Now, here he is, author of Liberalism is a Mental Disorder, Trump's War, and God, Faith, and Reason, Michael Savage.
So we're living through the new Soviet era in America, being promulgated by the Feinstein Committee. I call it that because she is the senior. She keeps saying she's the senior member of the committee. Well, she knows the libel and slander laws in America. She knows that there's a difference between libel and slander. She knows that defamation can destroy a person forever, and yet they're engaging in a form of defamation I have not seen in my entire lifetime in America as an American citizen, and more particularly in the 25 years I've been in the radio business and as an author, I have never seen such unmitigated defamation as I'm seeing against Kavanaugh right now. Now, in the first hour, I spent a little time talking about the Salem witch trials from my forthcoming book, Stop Mass Hysteria, which will be out across America, opening big, opening wide. Think of it as a movie that's opening in every theater in America. That's the one thing you got to understand. Although you won't see me on Fox News for the reasons I've expressed many times, it doesn't mean that the film is not opening wide. It's opening wide. Walmart and Sam's, it will be at bestseller tables. Books A Million, making news table. Barnes & Noble, every Barnes & Noble in America will have it on the new release table from the 9th of October through the 22nd of October, and will be on the holiday table from the 30th of October through the 12th of November. That's a big deal. Of course, on Amazon, it's a sponsored placement, headliner, and suggested purchase. So the publisher's doing an amazing job in getting around the boycott of Michael Savage by paying for placement in every bookstore in America, with the exception of the small communist bookstores throughout America where they use a form of censorship that they're entitled to do to their own detriment. Now, what we're about to do on the show is very risky and very dangerous. And I want to caution everyone calling that there are libel and slander laws in America that can get me in hot water and get you in hot water. But having set up that caveat, I'm asking anyone in America who lives in the districts of these new Soviets who have been falsely accusing Kavanaugh with the most astonishing claims I've ever seen in my lifetime. First, it was, remember the rape charges brought up by the psychopath that NBC aired last night by the scummy lawyer? Remember that? And then she said she didn't really mean it. If you live in a district of any of these senators who are quick to destroy a man, and you have something that you feel is a valid piece of their background that is not getting proper attention, I'm inviting you to air it on the Savage Nation with a caveat again. I'd like you to confirm where you're getting the information from. And there have been cases of mass hysteria in our own time that have destroyed people and almost destroyed companies. I'll give you one example of a corporate example. The contaminated Coca-Cola scare of 1999. And that began in 99 when more than 100 students in Belgium reportedly fell ill after drinking the beverage. Well, the subsequent investigation, coupled with some inept PR handling, cost Coca-Cola a cool $200 million and a several-day ban in other European countries. And while examination of the tainted batches did show contamination of bad carbon dioxide and phenol, 2 Belgian scientists speculated that the tainted products yielded too small an amount to cause real damage. And for them, the incident was mostly a case of mass hysteria, fueled in part by a prior scare of mad cow disease and dioxin-tainted animal products. A separate investigation by Belgium's High Hygiene Council in March of 2000 corroborated those claims and stated that most of the victims experienced a mass psychogenic illness, just as we're experiencing today in America, a form of mass hysteria with these trials of Kavanaugh, okay? There are many cases of mass hysteria in our past, but they've never in my lifetime been promulgated by a panel of left-wing fanatical Soviet-era U.S. senators. So now I say turnabout is fair play. If you have anything that you can say about these senators that you feel can be verified in any way without inviting a slander charge or a libel charge, go ahead, be my guest, make my day. Turnabout is fair play. So let's begin with some easy ones, such as Matma on KSFO line 5. Matma, go ahead, please.
Yes, sir. Thank you for taking this call. I'm responding to your request for more information about this Christine Blasey Ford case. I have been researching all weekend, and initially I thought I was going to debunk what was found on your website about these 4 companies that they say are CIA fronts because it says they're all on the same floor of the same building. And initially, I thought, I'm debunking this. Data Watch is in Bedford, Massachusetts. Admiral Security, is in Washington, D.C., and so forth, at different addresses. And the security firm, Admiral Security Services, is in Concord, California. And so originally I thought, I'm going to debunk this theory, right? But then I called Redcoats on the weekend. They're Massachusetts. I'm sorry. They're Washington, D.C. Metro area telephone number, right? And I get an announcement on their recording saying Admiral Security Services, meaning Redcoats is Admiral Security, and they are directly connected, even though they technically say they have different addresses. And I'd like your permission to go over and ask the people at Suite 260 over there in Concord, California, what's going on. And if you're one of the largest security companies in America, why do you just have a suite number? You have an actual big...
So what you're saying is what? Let's boil it down for the listener, that when I raise the question, is Ford tied to the CIA in some way? And I only ask the question because people have been circulating these rumors and making these connections. Are you alleging she is or she is not?
Okay, what I believe is, now separate from all that, I believe that she has been teaching a class for potential CIA agents how to basically get a job, and it starts at $43,000 as an intern in the Central Intelligence Agency if you intend to go into the covert operations area. And she has...
Where would she get the expertise on covert operations? That we're talking about the accuser, Snow White, Dr. Fraud. Where did she get information about how to be a covert operations officer?
How to take polygraph tests. That's part of how you get to be a CIA agent. You must pass a polygraph test. And in the advanced courses, you have to know how to fake it and pass a test even though you're lying, because you're a great deceptive spy, and you can convince people that...
Oh, she teaches that? She teaches that?
Pardon?
She teaches that course?
It's a course for interns of the Central Intelligence Agency at Stanford. Now, I noticed in the media they mentioned only that she was at Palo Alto University, which I'd never heard of, but they do have a psychological...
Right. Palo Alto University is a kind of a parking lot university, a storefront, basically. But she uses the words Palo Alto to confuse people into thinking she's a big professor at Stanford. Well, in fact, she does teach a course on how to get a job at the... She's a gatekeeper for the CIA at Stanford, according to what I've been able to read. Do you agree with that?
And that's not all. There are so many connections here to the Central Intelligence Agency. Her grandfather helped invent it, along with Wild Bill Donovan and Bill Casey, who made a nice speech after he retired, and he became...
Now, what makes you so interested in the connection between Dr. Fraud and the CIA?
Organization.
Sorry, I don't think you can hear me.
Yes.
What makes you interested in the connections between Dr. Fraud and the CIA? What brings you to be interested in that?
The thing that made me interested is I retired as a respiratory therapist about 5 years ago, and I'm suddenly inspired to become, for the first time in my life, an investigative journalist. But apparently, as you pointed out, there aren't any out there. Not one senator has done a background check on this woman, revealing the simple facts I've been able to accumulate over the weekend.
Well, okay, I posted on September 27th, is Dr. Ford deeply tied to the CIA? Okay. And her brother Ralph III used to work for the International... You saw all of this, didn't you?
Yes, sir. And also, here's a couple discrepancies in what may be said on your website you can correct, just so we don't get caught, making an error. He worked at Baker Hostetler, but like 9 years before they retained Fusion GPS. So there's a kind of a lack of a connection there, and also Deke is...
But wait, but the same law firm that her brother worked at did create Fusion GPS, the company who wrote the Russian dossier.
He wasn't there at the time that they did the GPS thing.
But it's the same company, isn't it?
You're absolutely right. And also, that's not the only connection with Baker Hostetler. These guys have been involved with the CIA for a long time.
Well, again, I want to say that I like the CIA. I've been a defender of the CIA. I love the intelligence services. I think we need them desperately. However, if there is a connection between Dr. Fraud or Dr. Ford, whichever you prefer, and the CIA, wouldn't you think that this is something the American people should be aware of?
Any investigative reporter worth his salt would have made some connections about...
Why do you think it's not been talked about yet on Fox News? Why has this linkage from my Twitter feed or my website been linked by any site in America? Why?
Yeah, very...
No, but why? Why are they not linking it and talking about it?
I totally agree.
I mean, they're quick to talk about Kavanaugh, the slightest hint of anything he ever did. from throwing ice to drinking beer is suddenly a big topic. Why is this connection not a topic when the left used to be obsessed with the CIA? Who is giving them the talking papers and telling them, don't you dare mention anything about Dr. Ford and the CIA?
Oh.
Who do you think is doing that? Well, I'll let people figure it out. Look, let me send you a copy of Stop Mass Hysteria. You're going to find many examples of mass hysteria through the ages. And Mahatma, thank you for calling the Savage Nation. Again, if you live in the districts of any of these accusing senators who are so quick to destroy a decent, honest man without any proof or evidence whatsoever, it's called hearsay evidence. It's what was done in Nazi Germany. It's what was done in the Soviet Union. It's how people were destroyed through denunciation. It was done during the French Revolution by ancestors of these senators, spiritual ancestors of these vermin. If you live in any of their districts and you think that there's some dirt on them that is worthy of national investigation, we're going to make news today. And I invite you to call 855-407-282. I suspect that some affiliates will drop this show while you are calling, as has been done in the past. Wait until you see who drops the show in the next 30 minutes.
Savage.
Look at some of these people asking the questions, okay? Look at Blumenthal. He lied about Vietnam. He didn't just say, hey, I went to Vietnam. No. For 15 years, he said he was a war hero. He fought in Da Nang province. We call him Da Nang Richard. Da Nang, that's his nickname, Da Nang. He never went to Vietnam. And he's up there saying, we need honesty and we need integrity. This guy lied when he was the Attorney General of Connecticut. He lied. I don't mean a little bit. And then when he got out, he actually dropped out of the race, and he won anyway, because Democrats always win in Connecticut. But here's the guy lied, and now he's up there talking like he's holier than thou. You know what? Take a look at his record. And when he got out, and when he apologized, he was crying. The tears were all over the place. And now he acts like, how dare you?
All right, that's Donald Trump finally calling out on a minor scale Blumenthal the liar. Which is a good start, but he's got to get much, much more aggressive. So I've asked you if you have any allegations that you feel are founded in some way in reality about any of the other Soviet-era accusers on the committee. 855-407-282 is the place for you to go. Let the American people decide whether these allegations are true or false. You say, well, you're engaging in what? What am I engaging in? Anything different than what they're doing to Kavanaugh? No. Now, I just got this email from someone whose name I will not read. And he writes, and he lives in San Francisco and knows Feinstein. He said, the speculation is that Judge Kavanaugh did something inappropriate in high school when he was a minor. Please have your listeners recall that Feinstein fully supported a president who, as an adult, lied under oath, had his law license revoked, had oral sex with a young intern in the Oval Office, and was accused of rape and or sexual misconduct by at least 4 women. Feinstein also supported a U.S. senator who, as an adult, drowned a young lady in a drunken stupor and then failed to report the incident for 10 hours. This is the holier-than-thou Feinstein, the crucifier. And then he throws a real bombshell out there, which I didn't know anything about. Finally, on Ms. Feinstein's ability to forgive or give a second chance, please remember that her son-in-law, Rick Mariano, the father of her only grandchild, was a heroin addict as an adult. I'm told that her daughter, Catherine, met him when he was in the Delancey Street program. Now, I can't confirm any of these statements. I can't deny any of these statements. But I believe that America is now looking very carefully at the accusers of Kavanaugh and saying, hey, wait a minute now. You're bringing up women who are making stuff up. As we can see, this is just a scandalous hit piece on this man. And so, therefore, let's see if any of this stuff is real. I don't know. I have no way to confirm or deny any of these things. But we're going to keep going until eventually we're off the air. Okay, it's that simple. And we'll be off the air. Believe me, I will be off the air. You know, many of you are listening to me on some huge stations. You'll not hear me in January. You don't know why. It's all political. You'll hear other reasons, but it's no other reason. It's all political. And I'll tell you more about that come January. But right now, we'll continue with what we're doing on the Savage Nation. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. What else do you have on who? Now, I don't know if we should even run some of these because I don't know whether they're here or there. But let's go to Yvonne on KSFO. Yvonne, what's your point?
Yes, my point is, I, as an Oakland resident, know lots of the people that was in Jim Jones' church. And Dianne Feinstein, she was the head of the Board of Supervisors in San Francisco. And she helped Jones gain power in San Francisco by making him the head of the housing authority. And so he was able to give his members houses and then have them to vote for who he said to vote for. And she also was helping Jones once he left San Francisco over at Guyana. She helped the Jim Jones get the welfare checks for the members that went over there with him.
Well, she helped make sure the welfare checks went to Guyana, where he moved the people in the Jim Jones cult?
Yes, over there. They all were getting their checks over there in Guyana.
Oh, that's interesting. And all for the patronage and the support. Well, is there any more to this? Because I'm coming back to this lady from Oakland in a minute on the Savage Nation.
Savage.
Why are senators above the law? You know, I'm a student of Roman history and Greek history and other histories. I've never seen such an imperious bunch as this bunch of vermin doing this to a man with no evidence whatsoever, making it up out of whole cloth. And the nerve of the government media complex to believe a scummy lawyer who represents a stripper. He digs up another psycho named Sweetneck, and NBC News runs her, and none of the things she says, they say, oops, we can't verify the claims. And they say, wait a minute, things that she said on camera differ from what she said in writing. So they defamed Kavanaugh. They defamed the reputation of the Peacock NBC News, and it doesn't matter to them because you, the idiots, still watch NBC. You have the power to do to them what they've done to me. You have the power to not buy the products that are advertised on that show. Do you understand that? Do you know that I have been subject to a boycott for over 25 years in radio? You don't know that. How come you never hear of a car company on this show? How come you never hear of a mainstream advertiser on this show? Because 5 people control the advertising business, and they steer things away from myself and others in talk radio whose politics they don't like. So I've been facing this blacklist for 25 years, and somehow I'm still here. But the fact of the matter is you have the power not to buy the products of any of these slimy networks. You could just say, you know what, I see that car on CNN. I'm sending them a letter saying I'm not buying that car. I'm emailing marketing of that particular car company. I'm not buying that company. I'm not buying your car anymore. You could do that. You don't know the power you really have. The problem is that you don't have an organizer. No one is motivated, the tens of millions of you out there. Remember I wrote about you as the Eddies and the Ediths, the real power of America. That's how Trump got elected. Look, let's stop with the I help. Let's just stop with the garbage. I, for a year straight, motivated you to vote for Trump. 1 straight year. I got all of the undesirables, the undecided people who stopped voting. I said, take one more chance. He is not a politician. He's a businessman. So you were the deciding factor. I don't need anyone to say, pat me on the head. He knows it. That's all that matters to me. And you should know it. Well, we're now at a critical junction again. To the millions of you who get this message on a daily or weekly or monthly basis on the Savage Nation, you have the power in the midterm elections to turn out and vote down the worst group of people in the history of this country. People who have conducted a massacre against a man who's, by all definition, as good as you're going to get. Is he perfect? Absolutely not. Did he drink in college? Probably. Was he a bit of a pushy guy? Absolutely. Look at his picture as a kid. He was a macho, testosterone-driven football player. What'd you expect him to be like? Like Blumenthal with the weird voice? He was a tough kid. I like tough kids. And he belongs in the Supreme Court because for the last 30 years, he's kept his nose clean. Probably cleaner than most of you. Probably cleaner than all of the scum on the committee who are calling him names and saying things about him that have not been proven. Certainly cleaner than the vermin who run the networks. And yet we hear nothing about their backgrounds. What does the guy who runs NBC News, what did he do in high school or college? What drugs did he take, if any? What was his arrest record, if any, anyway, that was expunged by his wealthy parents, if any? Do you want to start going down this witch hunt path with all the people who are smearing Kavanaugh on the Senate committee, all of the networks who are running around-the-clock smears? Do you want to look into Bill Maher's background, who is now using homophobic slurs against Lindsey Graham? Has anyone looked into Bill Maher and what he does after hours? Why are these people able to get away with this smear campaign without anyone looking into what they do after they're off the air? Why is that? You are the millions and millions of people out there with a keypad and a computer. You realize you could be detectives? Do you realize the power you actually have without leaving the comfort of your own home? What you could find on these people by doing a little digging? You are the true power of America. You don't need someone to lead you. You can lead yourself. And we can lead ourselves. We can make the Red Sea part. We can part the Red Sea and leave these terrible human beings behind. We can leave them behind. You have the power. When I see a decent man and his family destroyed like this, I realize that anybody can be destroyed in this country by the Feinstein gang. This gang of commissars are doing to Kavanaugh what was done in the Soviet Union, what was done in Hitler Germany. In denouncing someone, you destroyed that person. There was no trial. There was no trial necessary. All you did was denounce the person, and they were ruined. These are the tactics of the Nazis in Germany and the Soviets in Russia. I used to think we were a nation of laws and that with defamation and libel laws, you couldn't get away with this. But then I woke up and found out that the senators are above the law. Movies have been done about them. Books have been written about this kind of corruption. Remember, I wrote a novel called Abuse of Power, set in San Francisco. It was a New York Times bestseller. You wouldn't know it, would you? It was called Abuse of Power. Jack Hatfield was my character. So this is an old story, kind of defamation and smear campaign. And what's ironic here is that the left, which was bellyaching for 40 years about McCarthyism and McCarthy, are now actually worse than Senator McCarthy ever was at his height. Because as I point out in Stop Mass Hysteria, McCarthy was actually right. When he accused all of those members of Hollywood and of the media and of academia of working with the Soviet Union, he was denounced as a crackpot, even though he had been a war hero. They made a mockery of him. Show you how smart the left is. They took Senator McCarthy, who had been a tail gunner in World War II, one of the most dangerous of all positions. Think of it, a glass bubble on the back of a bomber with machine guns facing enemy fighters. He survived all of that. He came out a war hero, became a U.S. Senator. The vermin on the left called him Tail Gunner Joe as if that was something to mock rather than salute. But that was just the beginning. They said he was a drunk. They said he made it all up. Well, they destroyed the man. He died a hopelessly broken man. What they did to McCarthy is what they are doing to Kavanaugh and anyone who gets in the way of the left-wing phalanx that has destroyed America over the last 50 years. Now, we had an election, and we put Donald Trump in power. We stopped their juggernaut, and they're fighting to turn it around with every one of his major appointments. Make no mistake about it. This is really a mandate on you. I've said this to you before. By smearing Kavanaugh, they're smearing you. You could be a black transsexual woman in Berkeley, and you're being smeared if you voted for Trump. Do you understand that? Do you understand how this works? Do you understand they're smearing you by smearing him? And it's just the beginning. And so the only thing we can do is fight back. And again, I say, with a keyboard and a little native intelligence, you can probably uncover things about these senators that might just have them running back under the rocks that they crawled out of or the sewers that they live in. Because the internet is a very powerful tool. There's a lot of lies on it, but somewhere in the midst of the lies, there may be some nuggets of gold. And I invite you, the listeners, to become the detectives, to turn on the committee members who have done this to a decent man. I have never in my life seen anything like this. Never. But again, getting back to McCarthy and the McCarthyism that the left used to warn us about just for a moment. Years later, there was a publication entitled the Venona Papers, Venona. I wrote about it in one of my previous books. And the Venona Papers were written by former KGB agents, and they disclosed that, in fact, all of the people named in the committees and the hearings in the 50s by McCarthy were, in fact, Soviet operatives or Soviet fellow travelers. Every last one of them was guilty. And so here we are now watching the equivalent of the, quote, McCarthyism we were warned about taking place right in front of our eyes, and hardly one journalist in the United States of America makes the connection. It's a very, very sad day, but the truth shall win out. And I do ask you on Tuesday to vote with your credit card, and please get a copy of Stop Mass Hysteria, but not just get the book to enrich me, because I'm not going to buy a new car. I'm asking you to carry it home and put it on your coffee table, because I guarantee you there's someone in your family who doesn't believe a word that you say. Someone who is as ignorant as a doorpost, who knows nothing about history, who knows nothing about how the witch trials of Salem are identical to the witch trials of Kavanaugh. But they are. It's based upon the same methods of mass hypnosis and mass hysteria. That's just one example. There are numerous others. And I invite you to take home this cornucopia of information. It's not just a polemic, it's a history book. 855-400-7282. Let's see some of the callers, if I can dare run them. I'm a little afraid of this one. Rick on WABC. What's your statement, Rick?
Hi, Michael. Senator Kirsten Gillibrand so outraged over unsubstantiated allegations from 36 years ago, yet she has no knowledge about her father working for the NXIVM cult, Keith Rainier, who was involved in sex trafficking.
Whoa. Where are you getting this allegation that her father worked in a sex cult?
This is out of the New York newspapers, and the cult was out of Albany, New York.
Well, but you're saying these are only rumors about Senator Gillibrand's father.
That was pretty much documented in the New York Post and several other sources.
Really?
She claimed ignorance. I didn't know that that's what they were involved in.
Well, I don't know anything about it, but I'm sure she forgave her father for that, but she won't forgive Kavanaugh for having too many beers in high school. How does that work?
Yeah, maybe she should have her father submit to an FBI investigation and see what it's really.
I think so. I think that maybe there's some FBI investigation that should be done of every senator on the committee who has become a new witch hunter. I would invite an FBI investigation of Blumenthal, not just about his Vietnam record, but about his finances. Why should we not look into a senator whose fortunes have grown 10 or 50 fold since they came into office? Why is that not fair game, for investigation? I think it's long overdue for FBI investigations of every senator on that committee who's falsely accused Kavanaugh, and see if we can find out how their fortunes have grown so greatly during their tenure in office. How did that happen?
Absolutely. If only the mass media would participate in that, it would get done, Michael.
Well, I'm participating in it while I still can. I'm sending you a copy of Stop Mass Hysteria, which should arrive in a day or two. This is the Savage Nation. I'll be back in a minute.
Savage.
Well, in times like this, what do you look forward to the most? A good night's sleep, and that's why I advertise Casper mattresses. Truthfully, I have one. It's the best ever. It really does work, and you can switch to it so easily. And you're going to get a high-quality mattress at an affordable price. You'll sleep cool and comfortable. They make it so well. It comes to you in a small box. You'll say, how'd they get that thing in that little box? You don't love it. I'm telling you, they'll pick it up, give you back every dime. You could try it for 100 nights for free. From its engineering to its packaging to letting you try it for 100 nights in your own home. I don't know. I would try it if I didn't have one. It's no wonder Casper has over 35,000 five-star reviews of all their products across Casper, Google, and Amazon. So try it yourself. Go to the Casper website, Casper.com, and please use code SAVAGE so I get credit, and you'll get $50 towards the purchase of select mattresses. Again, that's Casper.com, code SAVAGE, and you're going to get $50 towards the purchase of select mattresses. Casper.com, terms and conditions apply. So I believe that the American people will now start investigating the Soviet-era senators who are destroying a good man, and I don't think they're going to like what comes up. I believe that the people are activated and motivated. It's the same army that elected Trump. For some reason, they're so naive or so drunk on their own power, rather, that they actually think that you are stupid. They bought their own lies. They actually think that we, the deplorables, are stupid, that we don't have the power of the computer to investigate allegations that have swirled about them sometimes for the last 40 years, ranging from the most obscene to the most extreme. And so when this stuff starts to surface up and float to the top of the bay, and people start to open up the boxes of statements about them, well, maybe the best is yet to come, and maybe we too shall have a day of freedom in this nation when the most high and the most powerful fall from grace. You never can tell. You just don't know what tomorrow might bring. And when you start this kind of thing of smearing a man who's as good as you're ever going to get, and destroying him, and destroying his children, and destroying his wife, well, the people will finally react. And I think that they will start looking at what people do after hours and what they've done before hours. They'll start looking at the Bill Maher's, for example, on Sunset Boulevard, who he dates, how old they are, things of that nature. Because rumors have swirled about all of them for a very long time, but they're all above the law. They are protected by the most powerful media figures in the history of the world. And somehow it never touches them. And then you look at the senators. Again, Barbara Boxer, for example. She's not on the committee. She's a retired one. She had the nerve over the weekend to go on a show and say, how dare Mr. Kavanaugh, Judge Kavanaugh, speak so loudly or something to that effect to a U.S. senator. This witch actually thinks that she is above reproach. They're drunk on their power. Power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. It's been said a long time ago. Power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. Now, there was a time in America that many of us went to the movies and we saw movies about corrupt senators who arranged murders, and we said, yep, that's true. We all watched The Godfather when Kate says to him, Michael, presidents don't kill people. And he looks at her and he says, Kate, who's being naive now? We all cheered. Everyone said, yep, we got it. And now we see the murderers in plain sight. In this case, they're murdering a man the same way Caesar was stabbed by all of his cohorts in plain sight. Kavanaugh was stabbed to death in front of the world to see.
Michael Savage, a host like no other.